Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar. Can you believe that we are already in April? Where is this year going? So tonight we want to talk to you about, so you're a first home buyer, what are your options? So as always, we talk about the fact that what we talk about here tonight is general information. So it's not specific to your particular circumstances. So it's always important to, before making any decisions, that you do consult with the experts such as brokers, etc., before making any decisions. So tonight we're going to be talking about your options as a first home buyer. So you may not be in a position where you can purchase your first home yet, and we want to talk about some options that you've got before you get to that point. And then obviously when you are ready to purchase, let's have a look at those options. So we're looking at before purchase and when you're ready to purchase. So for those of you that are joining us for the first time tonight, we are Justin and Jenny Watson. We're both 33 years old. We both work full-time with our 2-year-old toddler, Olivia. We joined the club in 2009 and became property millionaires in 2012. We became property mentors in 2016 simply because we wanted to give back to the club. The club had given us so much in terms of starting our property journey and helping us make good decisions that we thought it was time to give back and help others along their journey. We became YIC ambassadors in 2016 and we became the Young Investors Club presidents in 2018. So it's important that you understand we don't earn millions and millions of dollars. We are on quite average incomes. And I guess rather than bore you with our story, which we have talked about a few times on our webinars, just very quickly, we do have 5 properties in our portfolio. So why are we talking tonight? We know the process of buying your first home can be quite daunting. There are often choices to be made and it's hard to know what to do. When we purchased our first property, I literally cried for the entire month. I didn't want to get into debt. I didn't understand what that meant for us and I was completely terrified. So tonight we want to talk about different options that you have so that when the time does come, you're better armed with points to consider. So even if you're not ready to buy now, there are still choices that you make day to day that may impact your ability to buy when you're ready. So let's explore both. So we recently on the weekend attended the Vic State Property Club conference and we spoke to some first home buyers and parents of first home buyers. It was interesting to see how many parents are really desperate for their children to understand why it's important to invest in your future and how property helps you do that. One of the misconceptions was that home ownership was out of reach for the younger generation due to house prices. And tonight we want to talk about the reality is that this is just simply not true. So with a little bit of adjusting, it certainly can be done, but we will talk about that just in a little bit. So for those of you that have been following the YIC webinars, we don't want to bore you with our story again. We've recently explored the different choices that we made along the way to help us achieve what we have. So it's not all been sunshine, lollipops and rainbows. There's certainly been tough times, but it's all about balance. So for context, we have property portfolio of 5 properties at 33 years of age. We didn't have the luxury of the bank of mum and dad, so our parents helped us in another way in terms of introducing us to the club. So how we got there was by making smart choices early on and by using the free resources of the club. So now when we purchase a property, I no longer cry for the entire month of the purchase. I'm feeling quite comfortable, confident, and empowered in my decision. So the road to leading to your purchase. So what are some of the day-to-day choices that you can make in the lead up to being ready to purchase your first property? Once we have looked at your choices in the lead up to buying, we'll then explore your choices for buying, and there are more than you actually think. So remember, choices are yours and need to be specific to your circumstances. So the first item that we're going to have a look at is expectations versus reality. And if you have been attending the YIC webinars, we have talked about that quite a bit because I think it's something that's really important for this generation to understand in terms of wanting to get into the property market. So choice number one, set expectations in line with what's achievable sooner rather than later. Something decent, something that's not necessarily extravagant, but it does the job and it gets you into the market. Choice two, set expectations in line with what will take quite some time to achieve. So something like a more expensive property in a more expensive suburb, often known as the greatest and latest. By resetting your expectations and accepting that in order to get into the property market, you need to buy something a little further out of town, a little smaller and a little less extravagant. It'll likely mean that you waste less time saving up for your purchase. During the time that you are saving up, property values are bound to go up, which means then you need to save more and you could be continually chasing your tail. So it's about making sure that when you do purchase, it's something that you're comfortable with, but it really doesn't need to be the latest and greatest, because by trying to get the latest and greatest, you are chasing your tail because you're continually trying to save up as the house prices are going up, and your time in the market is less. So obviously you lose on some of that property growth. So what choice did we make in terms of expectations versus reality? We chose to buy a property 60 k's out of the city, an older house. Maybe if we had our time again, we would choose differently, but it's done the job that we need. So I thought tonight it was really important that you do see that, you know, all of our decisions aren't perfect. We are human. And yeah, potentially we would have chosen differently if we had our time again and chosen brand new. But it certainly did the job. So we then chose to continue to live in this older house and travel to work every day so that we could invest more money into our property portfolio. So we still live in this house today. And I often get asked, oh my gosh, how do you do the journey to work every day? Because it's 62 k's driving for me, which takes me about an hour and 15 minutes. And the reality is that those live closer to the city that catch the train, they're probably on the train for an hour anyway. So, but I have I guess the luxury of the fact that I've been able to put that money into my portfolio as opposed to something closer to the CBD. Ooh, a controversial one, buy now, pay later services versus saving up. So choice number one, I can't wait for that item I want. I'm going to use a pay later service. So this is where you can buy now and pay later. Choice number two, I really want that item, so I'll save up for it. So when I get it, it's all mine. So research shows that by making a purchase and paying for it using a pay later service, it's not likely to affect your credit rating. Where we run into trouble is if we miss payments or we pay late, which it's easy to do in this day and age when we're all so busy. It absolutely can affect your credit rating, which means it's harder to borrow money to buy a property. Also need to think about character. So when assessing loans, banks take into consideration the character of the person. Can a pay later service make it appear that you struggle to save or that you struggle to pay things as you go? It really does depend on the person assessing the loan. So that's something really important for you to think about as well. What choice did we make? For the most part, we saved before we made a purchase. I actually worked for a bank as a loan assessor, and I knew how risky the buy now, pay later could be. We did, however, make use of GE's interest-free periods, but was super strict with payments. So this credit check for GE no longer shows up on our credit history, as it was so long ago, and obviously the account's all been closed off. But as someone who did used to assess loans, something like GE or buy now, pay later, it would have absolutely flagged with me to think about, oh, does this person struggle to pay as they go? So credit card versus no credit card. I'm sure we've all got credit cards, but choice number 1, get a credit card. Choice number 2, don't get a credit card. Or choice number 3, get a credit card with a small limit. A common misconception is that if you don't owe anything on your credit card, banks will take this into consideration when assessing your capacity to pay. This is incorrect. The banks will cost you on your limit, not how much is owing. Okay, so if you've got a credit card limit of $20,000 and you only owe $100, the bank is going to cost you as if you have to pay back $20,000, because essentially you could rack up that credit card at any time. It's believed that by having a credit card limit of $5,000, it can reduce your borrowing capacity by around $20,000. So that's pretty significant. So if you're on the cusp of getting that property that you really, really want, and you're just short in your borrowing capacity, credit card might be what's doing it for you. So what did we do? Yep, we have a credit card like the majority of Australians. We have a limit of $5,000. And the reality is it does impact our borrowing capacity. We put all of our purchases on our credit card and we pay it off in time for it to be interest-free. That way, all of our savings are sitting in our mortgage offset, saving us interest on our own home. So this is where we've made an assessment to say the benefit of the mortgage offset reducing our interest outweighs that reduced borrowing capacity that we might have. And especially with where we are in terms of our property life cycle, in that we do already have 5. We started a family a couple of years ago. So, our property purchases, we haven't done anything in the last year, and we may not for another year or so. So I'm going to hand over to Justin now, who's going to talk you through another option that you have, and this is a common one that comes up when we talk to new members. Buy my own home, or do I invest?
Hi everyone, hope you're having a good night. So we'll go through this one here. So this first one is buying your own home first instead of investing first. So this is an example of a couple buying with a maximum capacity of $501,000 and buying their home to live in. So this is their first house to live in. And then after that, they go back, a few years later, they go back to the bank and decide they want to invest. So they want to buy a second property. As you can see here, so now their borrowing capacity is $269,000 to purchase the property. And also we've got an example here. So if they've got no children, that would be $269,000. However, if they've had 2 children in the meantime, their borrowing capacity would be $177,000. So you can see here, this couple here won't be able to buy another investment property due to their low borrowing capacity. So you can see at the bottom here, they'll have $500,000 property. If it doubles in 10 years, it'll be $1 million. And then if it doubles again 10 years later, that's 20 years, they'll have a $2 million property. So that would be $1.5 million in equity. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is buying investment property first. So with an investment property, you have income. So you have rent that comes in. So you'll be able to buy a little bit more, even though you're on the same incomes and have the same circumstances. So they'll be able to borrow $723,000 for an investment property. And then sometime later, they'll then look at buying their own home. So they'll have a second property then. So their borrowing capacity will be $523,000. So this is for their second home, it will be $523,000. So if they also have one or two children, their borrowing capacity will come down to $500,000, or if they have two children, come down to $433,000. So which means they'll be able to buy an investment property. So they'll be able to have two properties growing for them. So at the bottom here, you can see if they just had the one property, they'll have about $1.5 million in equity after the 20 years. But if they are able to buy two properties, they'll be able to have, so if they'll be able to buy the two properties, they'll have $3 million in equity after 20 years.
So you can see the difference that it can make by purchasing to invest first as opposed to purchasing to move into your property. So what did we do? We invested first. We bought a property when and where we could afford, which was interstate. So we rented it out, then moved into it when we moved interstate. This was a really good start for us as we were living in Sydney and it didn't earn enough to break into the Sydney market. So we had the choice of sitting on our hands and doing nothing because we did obviously want to live in our own home, but we knew that wasn't a reality for us in Sydney. So rather than wasting that time, we invested somewhere else. Someone else was paying our mortgage, and that's what's enabled us to now have 5 properties. And with time, we then obviously moved into our property. So it's about assessing where you are, where you want to be, and making the choice that's going to help you get there faster. Some other really quick tips to potentially save more money. This is probably a day-to-day conversation in our household because it's amazing. I think in the last year we've really focused on, okay, how can we save more money and really focus on increasing our savings. So we've made some really minor changes that have had a big impact on our bank account. So shopping at discount supermarkets versus shopping at mainstream supermarkets. So I won't say names, but the discount supermarket that I'm sure we're all thinking of, they've grown their stock range. So essentially we don't even go to the mainstream supermarkets anymore. And for the 3 of us, our shopping bill is $130 a week. Buying takeaway or cooking at home, there was a time where we probably ate out more than we did cook than what we did cook at home. Big change for us, and it's amazed me how much of an impact that actually has on our bank account. Foxtel versus Netflix. So I was one of those that absolutely wanted Foxtel, but Justin couldn't see the benefit of it. Very logical person. So we settled and we got Netflix instead, and I love it. Cinemas versus microwave popcorn and Netflix. So we, before we had our little one, we were at the movies every single week, $60 a pop. I mean, every month that's $240 a month. I'm not very good at math, but somewhere in the vicinity of $2.5 to $3 grand per year, which is just crazy. Whereas microwave popcorn, I think, is like $2 at the supermarket. So definitely a big change there. Clothes dryer versus clothes air dryer. Didn't know if everyone would understand what I meant by clothes horse, but one of those that you just hang the clothes over to dry. Some of us might have treadmills that we can hang our clothes on. Again, a big savings in the electricity. In the electricity budget. Brand name versus Kmart. I'm a Kmart addict, I'm not going to lie. Brand new smartphone versus hanging on to current one for another 6 to 12 months. And the reality is in 6 to 12 months, there'll be a newer model out anyway. I think that we're just continually chasing our tail trying to keep up to date with the smartphones. So there's some really quick tips that will hopefully get you thinking about other things that you could be doing as well. Okay, so we've saved up. we're ready to make our purchase. You've worked your way through all of life's choices to save up for your property purchase. Now let's look at these options. So I'm going to hand this over to Justin again.
All right, so we've got a here we've got a Moonee Ponds unit that we've got available currently with the property club. So it's a 1-bedroom unit in Moonee Ponds. It's a brand new unit, just completed. If for the people who aren't here in Melbourne, Moonee Ponds is 7 kilometres out from the CBD. They're $439,000 to buy. They got a 99 out of 100 walk score, which means they're pretty much close to everything: buses, trains, shops, entertainment, everything. And you've also got a stamp duty rebate on this property as well. So we're going to go through the figures here. We'll go through 2 figures. One will be without living in the property, and one will be living in the property and taking advantage of the first homeowners grant. So this property here is $439,000. So with a 10% deposit, so $43,900. Because we're borrowing 90%, you'll have to pay LMI, which is $7,770. So LMI is lender's mortgage insurance. So if you lend over 80%, you'll have to pay for lender's mortgage insurance, and it gets dearer the more you lend. So if you only have a 5% deposit, there is a possibility of getting a loan for that, which means lender's mortgage insurance will also increase. Okay, you'll have stamp duty of $21,410. That's a normal purchase, but this developer currently is refunding that $21,410. So as a normal investor not living in this property, so renting it out straight away, your initial cost to purchase this property will be about $51,670. So now we'll go through some figures for first home buyer. So if you move into the property for 12 months, you're eligible for first homeowners grant. So we'll work on the 10% deposit again. So $43,900. LMI the same as last time, $7,770. Stamp duty is now 0 because you're a first home buyer in Victoria, so you don't have to pay stamp duty. And you'll also get a $10,000 grant from the government. With this property, as I said before, the developer's giving a stamp duty rebate. However, if you're a first home buyer, he's also giving you that rebate as well. So you'll save another $21,410. So that will be after settlement. I'll pay that to you as a check. So this property here, as a first home buyer, you can get into this property for just over $20,000. So that's based on a 10% deposit. However, if you are lucky enough to have some family who could help you out with the guarantor, you'll be able to take away the LMI from that if they can get you under the 80% threshold. And also, you might be able to get a 95% loan, which means your deposit will be less as well. That would depend on your personal circumstances. So all right, so we've gone through the initial purchasing cost of purchasing these properties. Now we'll go through holding costs. So this is your week-to-week cost to hold this property. So if you brought this property as a first home buyer and you had to move into it for 12 months, based on an interest-only loan, this property will cost you $490 a week to live in. So this is one of the choices. This is based on your choices. So if you don't have enough for a deposit, for the property to buy it outright and rent it straight away, you might be able to afford the $490 per week to live in it for that first 12 months before you turn it into an investment property. If you turn it straight into an investment property and it's your first home to buy, so you've paid your deposit, you've paid your stamp duties, so you've paid the $51,000, this property will actually be positive $15 a week based on a $70,000 income and a 5% loan. However, you should be able to get a cheaper loan than that, but we're just based on 5% to make it fair for everyone. So with this one, the options are purchase to invest, the purchasing cost will be $51,670, or purchase to live in for a minimum of 12 months to receive the first homeowners grant, which will be $20,260. And remember, these figures are not based on anyone's personal circumstances, so you'll have to check with your mentor and get these figures ran for your specific circumstances. So now we'll move to Queensland, sunny Queensland. So things are a little bit different in Queensland for first homeowners compared to Victoria. So we're just going to go through these two properties tonight. But if you've got any questions or you're outside of Victoria or New South Wales, Victoria or Queensland, get in contact with your mentor or send us an email at yick@propertyclub.com.au and we can help you out there. So we'll go through this property here in Queensland. So this is a 3-bedroom townhouse, brand new, at Nudgee. So this is 13 kilometres north of Brisbane CBD. It's $454,000. There's an on-site pool, barbecue and gardens, and they're also offering a $5,000 cashback. So once again, we'll go through. So this is to invest. So if you brought this property just to invest and without a first homeowners grant, you got your 10% deposit here. So $45,400, LMI of $8,036. Stamp duty in Queensland is a little bit cheaper than Victoria, so it's only $14,312. And then you'll have your cash back from the developer at the end, which will be a cheque paid after settlement of 62. So the total purchase cost will be $62,751. So now, if you live in Queensland, you can take advantage of the first homeowners grant. So you've got the $10,000 deposit, that 10% deposit, which is $45,400, LMI of $8,036. You take away the stamp duty because you won't be paying stamp duty as a first home buyer, and then also in Queensland, it's a $15,000 first homeowner grant incentive, and then you also get a cashback of $5,000 from the developer. So the total purchase cost for a first home buyer for this property would be $33,463. So once again, if you're lucky enough to have a family member who can go guarantor for you, or you can get a 95% loan for this property, you'll be able to get it cheaper than this. But so these figures here, sorry, there's a mistake on this one. So this is for the Nudgee property holding cost. So you can see here, if you buy the property to live in, an interest-only loan would be $492. However, if you take advantage of the first homeowners grant and you use this as if you take advantage of the first homeowners grant and you move into this property, it will cost you $492 a week. However, if you have as an investment property and you've put your deposits in based on a $70,000 income, this property will actually be positive $40 per week. So the townhouse in Nudgee, so to purchase this as an investment, the total purchase cost will be $62,750. Or if you're a first home buyer and you live in it for 12 months, the purchase cost will be $33,346. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to contact your mentor or send us an email. Thanks.
Okay, so just before we finish up, we have actually had a question. So the first question that we've got is, what is equity? I'm going to keep it really simple because I'm a very visual person, but essentially equity is the sum in your property value that you own. So for instance, let's say you have let's keep the numbers really, really simple. You have a home loan for your property worth a home loan of $100,000, but the value of your property is $200,000. Your equity is $100,000. So the difference between the $200,000 and the $100,000 that you owe the bank. So hopefully that makes sense. We've also had the question, how would property help in retirement? Well, this is a big one. So this is one of those questions that I think we could talk about all night. But essentially, it's that it all comes down to that equity as well. So again, I'll keep the figures really simple. Okay, so Justin and I have 5 properties. Let's pretend they're all worth $100,000 each. So when we purchase those properties, we borrow, just to keep it simple again, we borrow $100,000. So we borrow the full cost of the property. But as we know, property goes up. Okay, so in, let's pretend 10 years, they usually say a property cycle is 7 years. We say 10 to be conservative. And if you wanted to be extra conservative, you could say 12. So for the sake of this exercise, let's go with 10. So we have 5 properties that we've paid $100,000 for, and we've borrowed $100,000 for each property. So we owe $500, and our portfolio is $500. In 10 years' time, property cycle doubles in an ideal world, and that's essentially the history that we've seen. So our $500,000 worth of property is now worth $1 million, but we still only owe that $500,000. So we've then got $500,000 in equity. So that's what we're going to use to help us retire. The sooner you start, the more property cycles you have. So for Justin and I, we probably, before we retire, we'll probably have 4 property cycles. Okay, so 500,000 doubled is 1 property cycle at 1 million. Then that doubles again, that's 2 million, doubles again, 4 million. We still only owe that 500,000. I think that's quite simply put. There's a lot more that we could talk about that, which we do actually explore in some of our other webinars. So check it out on the YouTube channel. But hopefully that helps with a little bit of understanding. Next question. Lovely. You've invested in 5 properties over 1 million value. Congratulations. Thank you. How do you know, given you're renting properties out, accounting for maintenance, etc., how do you know all of these investments are going to work for you, especially given the housing market is still somewhat volatile? Okay, so for me, who's someone who's a generally anxious person, that's a really, really good question. The reality for me is I look at the history. Okay, so sure, sometimes property fluctuates up and down, up and down, up and down, but we've picked areas that have stable populations. So we're not buying in a mining area. We're not buying in a project area or a military area where the base could up and move. We're buying around CBDs where in 50, 100 years, everyone's still going to be living around the CBDs. So when you look at the history over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the market doesn't seem that volatile anymore because you're looking at such a vast time. So, and because we are so young and we've still got 30, 40 years ahead of us, the reality is that in our mind, in no way in 40 years' time are our properties going to be worth less than what we paid for them. It just simply won't happen because of inflation in itself. So, of course, there always are ups and downs in the market, but we bought in knowing that this is a long-term investment, okay? It's not shares. It's not something that could return income straight away for you. It is purely for our retirement. So when we do hear the media hype about the property market, we just sit there sort of laughing, knowing that it's really not going to affect us because we still have so much time. In terms of, maintenance and expenses and things like that, there's there's always ups and downs. We've had situations where, our carpet's been damaged, so we've had to replace the carpet. But in the big scheme of things, it's really quite minor for us, because you would have seen when we were having a look at the figures that when you take into account all the expenses, all of the income, and all of your tax rebates, the reality is that it's actually not costing you that much to hold anyway. Of course, each property is different, so that's why we say talk to your property mentor before you do make a choice, because we can have a look at whether or not that's going to fit into your budget long term. So hopefully that's helped answer some of the questions. I think that's, hang on. Okay, so another question, how do you know this strategy is guaranteed for you? Well, nothing's guaranteed, but again, we look at the history over the last 50, 100 years. And again, I come back to, because we have so long before we retire, it's just almost unfathomable that our properties would be worth less than what we paid for them. So we're really not concerned about that at all. We're feeling quite confident. Do you ever feel like you're living to pay the bank? Not at all, because the tenant is paying our mortgage. So for our 5 properties, just to give you some context, we got $25,000 worth of cash back from the ATO this year that we would have paid in tax, that we got back simply because of the expenses with our property portfolio. So we go on holidays every year. I took time off to have our daughter. We certainly don't feel like we're living to pay the bank, because, like I said, the tenant's paying for the majority of it for us, and we have been very good with budgeting to get us to where we are. So again, check that out on our YIC YouTube channel, because we've got a budgeting webinar that can help you set goals and have a think about where you need to be. Another question, do I have to pay it back? So it really depends on, I guess, your strategy. So our strategy is that, one day it would be nice to pay it back, and essentially with the way the banks are going, it's likely that we will have to pay it back. But our purpose behind our portfolio is to hand this down to our children. So essentially that could continue. So, but having said that, it would be nice to hand over a property portfolio that has no debt. So it really does depend on what happens in the future. It's one that's really personal to everybody. And that's it. That's all the questions. Thank you so much for that. It's actually really interesting to see the different questions coming through, because we really want to make sure that these webinars are tailored to what everybody wants and what everybody needs. So things like this helps us to understand what you're looking for. So we really, really appreciate it. Oh, one more question's come through. Do you have any resources for people who already have a principal property and are now looking to invest? Your resource is your property mentor. Can't stress that enough. Your property mentor should be your best friend, your BFF on your property journey. So even if you do have property outside of the club, your property mentor will be more than happy to talk to you about the steps that you need to take to get to the next one and where the current one fits in with your strategy. If you don't have a property mentor, please send us an email at yic@propertyclub.com.au, and we'll make sure that you get set up with somebody who's going to be helpful on your journey. Before we go, I've decided that we've got a catchphrase for this year, and it's called Spread the Word. Surprise, Justin, I haven't shared that with you yet. But essentially, we are so desperate for people to understand that they need to look after their future. The reality is super's not going to cut it, and there's probably not going to be a pension when it's time for us younger generation to retire. So in lieu of winning the lottery, we are going to have to look after ourselves, which concerningly, I don't think enough of the generation is actually thinking about that. So to help you spread the word about the need to take action and the need to prepare for your future, the club are offering a $2,000 incentive. So if you refer a friend to the club and they make a purchase with the club, you will receive $2,000. So it just demonstrates the importance that we are really trying to spread the word and help people to understand that they need to look after themselves. So, sorry, I've just got one more question. Are there any costs? That's a really good question. I think from the moment that we first joined the club, I kept asking, what's the catch? What's the catch? What's the catch? Because I didn't have to pay a cent. The reality is that for those of us that do work within the club, we get paid by the sellers. Okay, the club has such a good reputation that we have a huge number of sellers that want us to list their properties. But the properties all go through a very stringent process with our researchers to make sure that it fits in with the club's philosophy. And it's the seller who pays the club. So the only time that our members ever get charged is if they're attending, on the odd occasion that they might be attending a seminar and we need to cover catering costs. Okay, so occasionally some seminars might cost you, conferences, they might cost you $10, $15, $25. It just depends. But there is no cost for the resources, for your best friendship with your property mentor, the training, the education. That is all free of charge because, like I said, costs are covered by the seller, so it doesn't cost you as the buyer, which is really, really important for us to help with your property journey. So there are no further questions. I thank you for your time. I apologise we've gone over. But if you do have any questions, speak to your property mentor or email yick@propertyclub.com.au. Thanks, guys.